As has been mentioned, my name is Nathaniel Janik, and I'm the Career Services Coordinator at AGU, and I want to welcome you to this month's uh, AGU Career Center Professional Development webinar titled Finding Your Fit, Making Sense of Your Career Options. A few logistics to go over really quickly. Throughout the session, we're going to be using some of GoToWebinar's tools to help you interact with us and your fellow audience members. As Dave had shown before, we're going to be using the question box not just for your questions, but also for your answers. We have some activities that we've got planned for this presentation where we're going to be asking you to type into that question box with your responses. And I just mentioned it a moment ago, but we also will be doing Q&A at the end of the session. So feel free at any time during the presentation to type in your questions that you want asked. And remember, there's no dumb question. So you're here because you want to know something. So please send us your questions throughout the presentation. And we're going to get to as many of those at the end of the presentation as we possibly can. If we don't make it to your question, we'll do our best to get in touch with everybody after the webinar to get you those answers that you're looking for. You'll also find a handouts tab in your control panel. There are two handouts there today. One is a copy of today's slides, and then the second is a sort of workbook. When we do this presentation live in person, we have a little workbook that goes along with it. We're not going to be doing all of the activities that are in that workbook, but we wanted to make sure you had it. After the webinar, feel free to take that out and go through some of the activities on your own. So yeah, I think, one more thing, this webinar is recorded, so you'll receive a link in just a few days. So don't feel like you need to take all of the notes throughout this, because you will be getting a copy of that recording. So with that said, I'm going to pass the mic over to David Harwell. Go ahead and take it away, Dave.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. We are going to be talking about finding your fit in the Earth and space sciences, and really just looking at some ways that you can make sense of your career options. Now, the agenda for today is to get to know yourself a little bit better. We'll take you through some activities to figure out what your drivers are, what your skills are, how you might articulate those, and then we'll look at some job possibilities in different employment sectors, as well as different types of positions. And what I want to do is to start out with you telling me what you want to do. So type in the question box what kind of job you want to do, where you want to do it. So that would be your career objective, right? I want to be the CEO of Dow. That's what I want. That's not what you want. So type into the question box and let me know what you want to do. You'll find the question box in the control panel for GoToWebinar. So I'm just waiting for you to type that in. Let me know what you want to do. What kind of job do you want? There we go. All right. Payling, thanks. You want to be a faculty or a researcher. Mary Beth wants to be self-employed. Well, that's good. All right. Oh, okay, Colin, you're going to like the webinar in a couple of weeks. Wants to be a data scientist, data analyst. Who else? By the way, where do y'all want to do this? So let me know what kind of job that you want. You just type that into the question box. Okay, Colin's going to be a data scientist, data analyst in the DC metro area. So that's pretty good. Who else has an idea of what you want to be, what you want to do? I'll give you just a couple of moments more to enter in your responses. And you just do that in the question box. Okay, honest enough. Kevin doesn't know. That's good. You won't be the only one. That's probably why you came to the webinar today. So we'll see if we can give you some ideas. Let's go ahead and look at some of those options. Now, when you're writing your job objective or figuring out what it is that you want to do, some of you may actually be able to be very, very specific. I want to be director of geophysics at a Ramco services company. This is an example of a type 1 job description, very specific about the company or organization, even down to a specific job title. But most people are not going to know that. Type 2 would be specific about the sector or the general job type. So an example is, I want to be an environmental scientist for a federal agency. Another variable here is that you might know what area of the country that you want to do this in, but you don't have any more specificity than that. This is still pretty specific. Or how about type 3? So you're relatively sure about the sector, but you're unsure about the job type. We could also reverse that, right? Relatively sure about job type, but not sure about the sector. And if you don't know what a sector is, we're going to get to that in a minute. So here's an example. I want to work in industry. So industry is a sector of employment. And then there's type 4. I just want a job, but no other information. Don't necessarily know where or what type of job that you want. I'm hoping that we can get you past this point, because type 4 is not specific enough to help you tailor your resume. And one of the big hangups that we see for new graduates, students especially entering the job market, they don't know what they're doing, what they want to do, and so they end up writing down everything that they've ever done, every course that they've ever taken, and their application materials are not targeted enough. And so until they do that, then generally the job search isn't as successful as it might be. But let's find out where all of you are. So we're going to ask you to fill out a poll, and I want you to tell me if your job description was type 1, type 2, type 3, or type 4. I think Nathaniel's going to administer the poll for us.
Yeah, so the poll has been launched, and it looks like the votes are coming on in. Again, their options there are type 1, very, very specific. Type 2 is mostly specific. Type 3 is relatively specific, and then type 4, you're just not sure. And I'm going to close the poll in about 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. And here's the results. So it looks like nobody is at type 1. We've got about 40% said type 2, specific about sector, general about job type. 27% were type 3, relatively sure about the sector, but uncertain of job type. And 33% said unsure of sector or job type. And, we definitely expected that to be the case for a lot of people here, because who else would be coming to a webinar titled Finding Your Fit? So we're hoping that this will help you narrow that down a little bit more. I'm going to pass it back to you, Dave.
Okay, well, thanks, Nathaniel, and thanks everybody for participating in the poll. So where should you be? We think that you should be here, either type 2 or type 3. So when we're looking at job searches, type 2 and type 3 are usually specific enough that they're able to, people that have know what they want to do and that are in these categories generally are able to target their resume and target their job applications towards specific people, because there's a lot of networking that's involved here, and the more you can target, the more successful you're going to be. For those of you that are uncertain, we're going to give you some more information about different types of jobs today, and hopefully you'll be able to be more specific. Now for type 1, there's only a few people that can do type 1, and that's actually that one's a type 4. So for type 1, the only ones that can do that, be that specific, are the people that have a lot of experience. So if you have a lot of experience, you can be type 1. And for those, if you don't have that experience, then you can't be as specific. There's also a problem with being type 1 because there's only a few jobs that are open to you, maybe only one, right? And type 4, we already went over that. It's just too generic, too general. Now, how are you going to understand your fit or find your fit? It's by understanding yourself, what drives you, and the skills that you have. You also have to figure out what's available in the job market. So we're going to look at those 3 variables. Your drivers, these could be, some people call these competencies. Some people call them values. So it's the things that make you do what you want to do, the things that make you feel good about what you're doing. There are the available jobs. That is simply, will somebody pay you to do what you're able to do? And your skills. So what are you good at? And here, I want to take it a little bit further than just what are you good at. It's actually should combine with your drivers. It should be things that you're good at and you like to do, right? And if you get a match of all of those, then that sweet spot that's right in the center of the diagram where all 3 of the vectors overlap, that's going to be your best fit. Now, what happens if you just get 2 out of the 3? So for example, we could have a job that's available and it matches your driver, but you don't have the skills. So that's going to be this part of the diagram. And if somebody will pay you and it's what you want to do, then that's great, sort of, but you're going to be incompetent. So you're really not going to be able to advance in that job. You may not even be able to hold on to that job. So it's not the best match for you. We could also look at where something matches your drivers and you have the skills to do it, but there's no available job, right? No one will pay you to do it. That's this part of the diagram. But if that's the case and no one will pay, well, that's called a hobby, right? So that's good to do in your off time, but we got to find something that somebody will pay you to do. And then the other variable here, or combination, is something that matches your skills and there's a job available, so somebody will pay you to do it, but it doesn't match your values. And if it doesn't match your values, you're probably going to be miserable. So again, not the best match. Now, there are some cases where people will take one of these types of positions if it is only temporary. That is, if it's along the path to getting what they really want. So at a government agency, maybe you take a lower level position so that you can get your foot in the door, and then you can apply for the job you really want. So sometimes there's a strategy. But when you get all 3 together, then that's when you're going to have your best fit. And that's what we're aiming for. So let's talk about your drivers and your skills, and then we'll talk about available jobs. Okay. So what really matters to you? What makes you tick? What makes you happy? What is satisfying to you? Here are some examples of drivers. It could be that you want to advance in your job. You want to have the corner office. You want to have a cool job title. It could be that you like structure and you like clear guidelines about what it is that you're supposed to do and a clearly defined role. It could be that you want to have a balance between your home life and your work life, right? Personal and professional. Or it could be you just need the money, or you want the money, whether you need it or not. For some people, it's all about the challenge. For others, it's being able to determine what they want to do. And nobody's going to tell me what to do, right? I want autonomy. Or it could be that you want to do something right. And if you're not able to do something the right way, you're not going to be satisfied. For some, it'll be security. That is, knowing that your job is going to be there no matter what. So maybe it's you don't make the most money. Maybe your job title's not the best. But come day in, day out, you have a job. For others, it's going to be altruism. This is big for me. If I'm not able to help other people and get that warm fuzzy back from helping them, it's not very satisfying to me. And for others, it's discovery. Now, these are 10 different examples of drivers. There are certainly others that are out there, but these are the most common that we see in the Earth and Space Sciences. And so now I want you to take a moment to tell me what your top driver is. Now, ultimately, your homework, if you do that handout, is to choose your top 3 drivers, because if you can figure that out, then you can, that's going to point you in the direction of a job. I'm stalling for time here while you read through these and figure out what your top driver is. Once you do, type it into the question box. Okay, so tell me what your top driver is. Okay, Mary Beth says balance. Colin, wow, overachiever, did all 3. So looking at balance, security, and money. For Sarah, it's altruism. Sarah, you're my kind of people. Kirsten and Shen, all about balance. Rachel, also altruism and discovery. Good. Vasilina, it's about altruism, working as part of a team. Okay, so you came up with another driver that's not on our list. So that's good. That's letting me know that you know more about yourself. Julia, altruism. Megan, it's all about altruism, discovery, and balance. Aaron, security. Kirsten, security too. Pei-Ling, discovery, challenge, altruism. So thanks for giving us that. But this is really giving yourself an opportunity to look at what types of positions are going to be good for you. If you know your top 3, what your objective is to find a job where you get to do those 3 things. Find a job that satisfies those 3 criteria. If you can find a job that does that, you're going to be in good shape, okay? But we also need to find a job where you have the skills. And so I'm going to give you some examples of skills. These skills we put together based on our talks with employers, figuring out what makes a new job candidate successful. So we have personal skills, interpersonal skills, and operational skills. Let's walk through it. So at the personal level, or interpersonal, we could also say, being effective, being accountable, being proactive, so not waiting around for somebody to tell you what to do. If you see a problem, just go fix it, right? Being persistent, so if you get knocked down, you're going to come right back and you're going to keep hammering at that problem until it's fixed, right? Being adaptable. This is important because no company or organization gets to do the same thing forever, right? Even in academia, we write new proposals all the time, so you're always building on your ideas. If you're in industry, you've got new products. Some competitor comes in and they make your product more cheaply, well, more inexpensively. People are going to go to the new vendor, so you've got to figure out how to do something else. So adaptability is important here, and you need to be ethical. On interpersonal, well, you need to be able to communicate. If you're doing great things, but no one knows about it because you're the only one that knows about it, that's not going to work very well, right? You need to be able to communicate both orally and in writing. If you're in academia, that's going to be through the journals and making presentations. If it's in industry, Well, you've got to write a lot of reports and memos for senior management for the business side of the organization, and you're probably going to have to make oral presentations. The government jobs are much the same, right? And you will have to be able to communicate with people that aren't necessarily scientists. It's also good in today's climate to be culturally and socially aware. For many of us, and teamwork is one of those things that you identified as drivers. And that's good because chances are you're going to end up being part of a team. The problems that we're solving today are much more complex than they were 10 or 15 years ago. So they require collaborations. And if we're working on a team, we need to be aware of what our team members are going through. So we want to be culturally aware, we want to be socially aware, and that'll make us a better teammate. So teamwork is also one of those skills. And being professional, knowing what being professional is, wearing the right clothes, presenting ourselves the right way, in certain situations. A few years ago, I was working with an employer at a career fair, and they were looking for undergraduates. And I said, well, great. We have many that have just graduated. They're in your technical area. I'm going to line them up and send them your way. And then after the interviews, I checked in and I said, this particular position was in technical sales. And I said, did you find what you were looking for? Because I knew that they were out there. And the students I pushed her way had the skills. But she said, no, not really, because I wouldn't trust them to be professional enough to represent our company. So I'm still looking. So these are all important skills to have. Operational skills. So because those problems that we're working on are so much bigger, you have to be able to think about the whole system. Also, if you're working in a company or in a team, you have to be aware of what your part of the project and how you execute that part of the project, how it affects everything else. So is somebody else waiting on your data? Are they depending on the outcomes of the experiments that you're going to run? In a business, is there a decision that you're making early in the process that's going to affect what the company is able to produce later on? So being able to think systematically, understanding the finances, and having some business acumen is a good thing. Being able to manage your time, so your manager doesn't have to manage your time. They should manage their own, right? And you should too. Project management is a good thing if you have that. Thinking critically and analyzing and leading and providing direction. So that's a lot of stuff, and nobody can do all of those things. If they could, they would be a purple unicorn, and we know that there are no purple unicorns, not in this universe. Well, maybe one or two, but they're very, very rare. So what I want you to do now is to go through and figure out what your top skill is. So out of all of these, in the worksheet that's attached, you also have these, and in there, I'd want you to go through and check off all the ones that you're good at, not only the ones that you're good at, but the ones that make you feel good. That's the Marcus Buckingham way of looking at it. If you haven't read his books, they're quite good. That's Marcus Buckingham. So tell me what your top skill is for today, and then later on after the webinar, I want you to go in and fill this out. So you'll check off the ones that you're good at, and you'll put X's next to the ones that you don't want to do. And the objective then is to find a job where you can maximize the things that you're good at and minimize the things that you're not so good at. Okay, so Julia says time management. That's great. I would say Colin has a question here. So how do skills matter at the beginning of a new job? So you have a PhD and you've shown your ability to go and teach ourselves new skills in a relatively short amount of time. Well, notice that these skills are not your technical skills. So your technical skills are probably going to get you the job, but if there's a reason for you not to stay at that employer, it's probably going to be because you don't have one of these. If you're unable to communicate what you're doing, then you're not that valuable, right? So it's important to have all of these types of skills. Not all of these. It's important to have softer skills, these interpersonal, operational types of skills, along with your technical skills. All right, thanks, Sarah. Sarah says communications, so that's good. Kirsten, persistence. Rachel, accountability. Pei-Ling, critical thinking and analysis. For Colin, it's top is critical thinking and analysis. That's good. Megan, persistence. Veselina, proactive nature. So those are all good. So I want you to think about those. There is a worksheet that's attached, so you can get to that in the control panel. And after the webinar, go through and check off all the things that you're good at and that make you feel good, and put an X next to the ones that you don't want to do, or that you may not be quite as good at. Now, what kinds of jobs are out there? You know your drivers, you know your skills, you're ready to apply them. Well, there are a lot of different kinds of jobs that you may not have thought about. Certainly, you're going to be more familiar with the ones in the science category. And this graphic has a lot going on. This is from AGI, the American Geoscience Institute, one of their geoscience currents. It's an infographic, the workforce infographic. So you can look at it in detail by downloading it from their website. But I wanted to show you that there are different categories here. There's jobs related to the law, to business, policy, writing, education, medicine, for example. And there are the different sectors of employment. So you can work in academia, you could also work in industry or government, or you could work for a nonprofit like I do, also known as a non-government organization. And some of the fields, we talked about science and business and policy. Inside those are all sorts of jobs. So you say in the law, it's not specifically listed here, but maybe you would be interested in being a patent agent. So you could, you don't have to be a patent lawyer to practice patent law. Companies usually employ a lot of patent agents to write the patents, and then it's passed on to a lawyer because you don't want to have to pay more than one of those. There are overlaps with medicine. Certainly, as the field of geohealth is coming to the forefront. Education, not just in working at universities, but also K through 12. You could be a technical writer, and it doesn't show it here in all the sectors, but you can be a technical writer anywhere. In industry, somebody's got to write all those little pamphlets that are stuck in with everything that you buy, telling how to use it. There are reports. There are also environmental regulations that have to be complied with. So there are a lot of different possibilities for you, and you need to take time to think about which types of jobs, which types of positions are going to satisfy your values, your drivers, and which ones that you have the skills to do, and which ones will minimize what you don't want to do. Oops, let me go back there. Now, you can go anywhere. At least that's what my mom said, right? But you might not go anywhere. At least the people that have gone before you, this is where they went. So this is coming from a survey, again, from AGI, of new graduates, recent graduates in 2017. So the bachelor's level graduates ended up going into all four sectors. A few of them into academia, most of them went into industry, and there was a sizable group that went into government, and then nonprofits, that's the green on the end. For master's level, again, most of them go into industry. The second biggest there is the gray bar, that's government jobs, and then a few will go into academia. For PhDs, the majority are going to go into academia, but there's almost half will also end up in industry. Now, in last year's graduating class, we didn't have a sizable number of people going into government or nonprofits from the PhD graduates, but in previous years we have. It's usually quite small. So you can still see that the major areas for PhDs are going to be academia and industry. Now, if we look at higher education and the jobs that are available, most people think about the tenure track positions. So being an assistant professor, then working your way up to be an associate professor and on to full professor. But I want to make you aware of the other types of positions. So there are non-tenure track positions. Many of these are contract type positions where you come in and teach a course or a series of courses, or perhaps you come in to do research but not to teach. So that could be sabbatical replacement, being an adjunct professor or an instructor, also being research faculty, or maybe you're a student advisor. There are also non-teaching positions. So if you don't want to do the teaching, you don't want to be responsible for being a principal investigator on research, but you still want to be involved, you could be an instrumentation specialist. You could run a lab. Perhaps you're a contract researcher, or you're working in the tech transfer office, being a patent agent. You can also help write things. So being a technical writer, either to help write grants or to write papers. Those are two areas where there's a need. Also being a librarian, or these days an informational specialist or a data wrangler, are a few different types of positions that would be available. In terms of the types of education institution or academic institutions, they are in different categories, and this is coming from the Carnegie classification. So there are only 335 institutions in the United States that give doctoral degrees. There are 741 that are master's colleges or universities. Sometimes those are also called comprehensive universities. Then there are baccalaureate colleges, 583. So the highest degree that a baccalaureate college would give is a BA or a BS. Then there are associate colleges. Sometimes those are called community colleges, and there are other types of schools here. What I want you to see, though, is to look at those top four. So the top one is PhD granting institutions or research-intensive universities. And many people think that they're going to go into a research-intensive universities, but there are very few of these. Now, the numbers are a little misleading, because if we were to look at an associate's level or a community college, sure, there are a lot more of them, but there's probably only one scientist teaching several different scientific courses, right? So you would be the only one of you. If you're at a doctoral university, some of those departments are as big as 10 or 15 other faculty that are doing similar research that you could talk to. So I just want you to see the relative size of the opportunity that's available in each one of those types of institutions. Now, the things that are priorities for a doctoral or research institution, well, it's probably not going to be surprising to you. It's all about the research. That's number one. So it's not really about, it is, you're expected to do a good job at teaching, but the thing that you're going to be judged on primarily is research. Then you're going to have service that you do for the college or university. And teaching, well, teaching comes last in most cases. So when it comes time for tenure, I'm going to say, have you established yourself as a world-renowned researcher in your field? Have you published? Have you obtained the grants that are necessary to do your research? Have you given back to the university and the community, again, to help build your reputation? And have you been a good teacher? At a primarily undergraduate institution, so here it's those comprehensive universities that have master's programs, or it's the baccalaureate level institutions where the highest degree that they give is a bachelor's degree. Teaching's going to be number one. So it's all about the students, all about their experience. Service is going to be number two here. Research number three. Now, if you're at a comprehensive where you have a master's program, you might bump research up to number two and put service last. But that's because if you're having master's level students, then they are likely to do master's level research, right? So there's more of a need for you to do research, and it will be expected. If you're at a master's level institution and you're doing research, it's really about the student experience. So it's not so much about the research outcomes. Certainly they're going to be important, but it's going to be about teaching the students to reach those research outcomes. An associate's level college or two-year college, community college, those are all names for the same thing. These are primarily institutions in the United States. We don't see a lot of associate level colleges outside the US. And they typically don't have any research programs, so it's going to be all about the teaching. Then it comes to service, and service here is not just to the college, but to the general community. If you're at a community college, you're going to have to be doing research out into the community to identify students, and that's so it's very important there. And there's going to be little to no research. If you are doing research, you're probably going to be doing it in conjunction with a four-year school, because you're going to be very busy at doing teaching. So the exception to that is we do see many of the community college or associate level faculty doing research in education, pedagogies, what works for different populations. So let's talk a little bit about the private sector. In the private sector, we have a few different types of jobs. So you can look at this as a process chain. You come up with the idea or the starting material over here on the left at exploration and R&D. That's what we're used to thinking of in academia. All right. So we find in geology or in geophysics, it might be that we're identifying where a particular mineral is or a compound that we want to extract. In other forms of research, say we're making an instrument to detect something in the environment. This is where we come up with the idea of how to do it. The next step is to make a product that somebody can buy. So if it's a mineral, we have to extract it from where it is and figure out how to purify it into a usable form. If it's that detector, well, it's figuring out how to manufacture it. Now we'll get to the manufacturing process in just a moment, but you're taking it from the idea into a product that somebody can buy. And generally, this is where engineers come into play. In manufacturing and supply chain, there's two things here. So again, more on the engineering side is figuring out how to actually make the thing in a reproducible way or to purify it. If we're in a service model, so say we're going out into the field and we're going to do studies, this is where we're actually writing up the results of those studies, right? Supply chain is how do you get all the materials to build what you want to do. So if it's that detector, where are you going to get your supplies from? Where are you going to get the silicon chips? Where are you going to get the filaments for your detector? However it works. You've got to identify where all those things come from so that you have an uninterrupted supply. Because you have people that are manufacturing the product, and if they have to wait for all their starting materials, well, then you're wasting a lot of money, and because you're having to pay them whether they have the materials to build it or not. Now, in larger companies outside the geosciences, we see GIS folks working in this area, risk assessment people working in this area. So if we know that there's going to be hurricanes in the Gulf, and we need, so Mars Candy has a group of people that do this. So they may want bananas, or maybe they want chocolate. So if that's coming from South America, and there's going to be a lot of hurricanes, then they want to find a land route or maybe transport through the air so that they bypass the hurricanes that are happening in the water below. And we also have to make sure that whatever we make is of highest quality, or at least quality that meets the regulations that are associated with the industry. So we have two types of people here. We have people that are looking at the quality of the product. If this is a report, this is also doing the editing, making sure it's ready to go to the client. If it's a candy bar, it's making sure it's going to taste good, it's going to look good, and we're going to want to eat it, right? And then there's the regulatory part of that. So does it meet the health and safety regulations? Does it meet the environmental regulations? And that's where geoscientists come into play a lot of times, especially the environmental scientists. And this is also where we have a lot of technical writing. So filling out all the reports to document that the organization is doing what it's supposed to do in the way it's supposed to do it. And sales and marketing. Now, a lot of scientists don't see themselves here, but it's important that for any company that they have somebody that's technically literate, that understands how the product that you're making. So if this is a detector, how do you use that detector? How would you explain to the person that you want it to buy it what its utility is? And how do you help them troubleshoot it? So say they do buy it from you, who's going to do technical support? Well, you need a scientist that understands the instrument to do that for them. And marketing is, sure, it's about getting the messaging right so that the customer understands what they're buying or wants to buy it, but it's also about trying to figure out what their need is, doing the research into what the customer's needs are. And then there's all the support functions. So remember that radial graph that we showed you a few minutes ago with all the different types of jobs? This could be jobs in human resources. Finding scientists. Well, you have to know what their qualifications are if you're going to find them. And so it helps to have a scientist in that role. Being a patent agent or any of the other things that help keep the company going. Maybe understanding the business behind the science or that supports the science. Now in industry, where did the new grads go from last year? Well, for bachelor's level grads, they went into environmental sciences as their number one. Number two was research institutes. And then we had a tie for number three. It was mining, oil and gas, and nonprofits, and other education services. So really several different smaller groups of people went into those types of institutions. For master's levels, well, it's oil and gas is number one, and environmental sciences was second, and then mining And for PhDs, it was primarily research institutes, then oil and gas, then environmental sciences. Now, government positions are also prevalent. It depends. How you get to those government jobs depends on what country you're in. In the U.S., you'd go to usajobs.gov. That's a good starting place. It's not comprehensive. Any of the agencies can advertise for jobs in different ways, but you will find the most of them there. And what you're going to want to do is just start searching for the type of job or position that you want. So when you're coming up with a job objective, this is where you type that in and see if they have any. There's also a program called Pathways for Students and Recent Graduates to Federal Careers. And that was talked about more during our March 22nd webinar. So I'd encourage you to go look at it. It's a great way if you're a student to get into the programs, a student or a recent grad. It's a fast track way to get into employment for the federal government that other people don't have access to. So look there. And don't forget about jobs at the state level or the local level. If you're outside the U.S., it's not just at the top government levels, but at every level of government, there's going to be jobs for earth and space scientists. Now, what are those types of jobs? Well, you can see government jobs include all the different types that are included here, even writing. I'm not sure why that was excluded in this particular infographic, but it shouldn't have been, because federal jobs also include technical writing. So all job categories are covered and all fields are covered. In fact, government jobs look a lot like a blend between academia and industry. It has this kind of blended culture, and it really depends on the agency that you're going in. Some of them feel more business-like, some of them feel more academic. So now it's back to you. We started with asking you what type of job that you wanted, and for many of you, you're down in the type 4. You just really didn't know. So I'm hoping that if you don't know for sure, at least you have a hint, and I'd like you to at least guess at what you'd like to do. So type that into the question box for me. Let me know what you want to do now. Okay. So I'm looking for responses in the question box. Let me know what types of jobs you want to do. Okay, Sarah wants to do technical writing. That's good. Julia is going to explore environmental scientists and the government. Megan wants to do be a research scientist with a government agency. All right. And Veselina wants to work in industry in the environmental context. So that's great. So that is all for today's webinar, at least for the presentation. But now we have time for you, and I'd love to hear from you about any questions that you have.
Yeah, so thanks, Dave. We do have some questions in. Some of you got them in early enough that I was able to put together a little slideshow with them. So the first question that we have here, I just graduated from undergrad, and I feel like if I tailor my resume, there will be nothing left, and it'll only take up a quarter of a page. How do I tailor my resume?
Okay, so we have some resources for you, and we're posting those online. It really comes down to writing a story. So don't just tell me what skills you have, but I want to know how you can apply those skills. And so we teach a concept called the car analogy: context, action, result. So in 2 sentences, can you tell me what it is that you were able to do? So if you're a GIS specialist, or you have training in GIS, that's great, but I don't know what that means as an employer. I don't know what you can do with that skill. So if you can tell me about the experience, either in class or on a research project, or if you have on-the-job experience, what it was that you did. Give me the context. Where did you do it? Why was it important? What was the action you took, and what was the result? And that way it's going to beef it up. Your resume won't just be a list of single words. It'll actually be some statements about what you can do and how you can help a specific organization that you want to apply to.
Great. So the next question I got here is how can someone learn more about where to look for companies and nonprofits that will suit their goals or drivers? Where's a good place to look?
Yeah, so all of the associations have job boards. We have one, GSA, as well as I could name any of those acronyms. There's also general job boards like Indeed.com. You could look on LinkedIn if you're interested in industry. LinkedIn is a good place to go. You should fill out and have an online profile on LinkedIn. So you can search, and you can also help people to find you. But in order to fill out that profile, you need to be able to tell those stories about how you have successfully applied your skills.
Right. Yeah. And I think LinkedIn even it's increasingly extending into the academic community as well. So it's definitely a good way to sort of at least get yourself out there. So that if you make yourself visible on LinkedIn, it makes it a lot easier to find the companies. Download the LinkedIn job app and turn it on so that you're getting updates, so you can just see what sort of opportunities might be out there. So next question that I have here is what about self-employment? Where does that fit into your driver skills available jobs model? So I think that I have the right skills and drivers. So how do I create that available job?
Yeah, we probably need a longer discussion, but with being an entrepreneur, is what you're trying to do. It's sometimes hard to do when you first get out of school because it relies so heavily on your network. So if you're going to be a consultant, the number one thing you have to do is find people that are going to pay for your service, right? So you have to know who needs your type of report that you're going to write or study that you're going to do or thing that you're going to build. And that can be a challenge. So for new grads, I'd probably look at working for a consultant firm for a few years to build up your network. If you think you're really ready to go, you can do that. Be aware that it's the time that you'll spend doing what you're an expert at. It's probably more like 20 to 40% of your time. You've got to take care of the business. With the rest of it, you got to manage your finances. You have to manage your liability, your insurance. You'll have to incorporate. You'll have to find clients. You'll have to talk to those clients, build proposals for them. Oh, you also have to answer the phone. And if you're the only one there, well, you got to clean house too. Take care of. Clean the bathroom once a week, those sorts of things, that take up time. So I'm probably knocking some of the romance off of being an entrepreneur. And that's my job, because you have to be kind of crazy. You have to be kind of fanatical to go it alone, right? So if I can knock you down that easily, it's not for you. If you're still convinced that after everything I throw at you that you want to do it, then that's a good indication that this could be a route for you.
Great, yeah, and I don't think that actually came from a new grad. I think it came from a not so new grad.
Okay.
So yeah, so I hope that answered your question, and that yeah. All right, so the next question we have here is so the skills which I consider myself proficient at may differ than what others think I'm good at. Should I get a second opinion on identifying my non-technical skills or even my technical skills?
Hmm. Well, your technical skills as an employer, I'm going to take your university's word for a big part of it. They're giving you a degree. So I've got to assume that you pass the courses, you've met their qualifications to get that degree. Now, I may ask you to demonstrate some of those proficiencies, and I'll ask you questions about, if you're good at modeling, I may ask you about different types of models, just to see how well you really know it. Did you just take it in class, or are you able to actually apply it? You can ask other people about it, but unless they've been involved in your research and know, at least on the technical side, what you're capable of doing, they may not be able to give you good an assessment. Um, it is good to talk to others about how they view you, because we can be blind. So we may think we're good at something, and maybe we're not, at least on the interpersonal level. So take that as feedback, but don't take it as that you can't do it. We had whole generations of students that come from minority populations, or that were women, that somebody told them, oh, no, you can't do that. You're no good at that because you are part of a specific group of people. So the person that decides what you're going to do should be you. Um, Listen to what they have to say. Um, Help yourself be better in those areas where you can. But ultimately, it's not just about what you're good at, but it's what you're good at and makes you feel good at doing.
All right, I've got another question that just came in. It might be a tough one to answer on the fly. For U.S. citizens living outside the U.S., what are some U.S. funded geoscience opportunities that they can be engaged in without being in the U.S. or traveling to the U.S.?
Hmm. Okay, well, a lot of research, I'm going to give you a preliminary answer, but you should dig deeper. Um, so most research these days is global, especially if we're talking about the geosciences. It's not like the tectonic plates or have a country associated with them. Um, so the problems that we're working on are global in nature, and that means that we need to have collaborators. So if you want to maintain your connections to the U.S., find U.S. collaborators to work with. Um, that's they will gain by having somebody that's in wherever you are, right? So they have somebody on the ground that can do measurements, research in the area that you're in, and you gain by maintaining that connection back to the U.S. So that's one way. There are some specific research programs with the U.S. State Department. NSF, the National Science Foundation, has programs that they fund. So if a U.S. researcher has a research grant already with NSF, they can, I don't remember the program name, but you can ask for an additional grant to cover a collaboration with somebody outside the U.S. And NSF also funds fellowships for researchers, U.S. Citizens doing research abroad as part of their education. So those are some ideas.
All right, great. So, yeah, before I give you the last question that we have, I just want to remind everybody that we have the data management fundamentals coming up May 17th. And then the following month, it won't be on the third Thursday, it'll actually be on the second Thursday, which escapes me which date that is. But we will have a presentation on uh, transitioning to a new job or getting ready to start up that job search somewhere in that sort of realm. It's going to be called switching gears, I believe. So keep an eye out for those ones. All right. So the final question before I let everyone go, and I'm going to thank everybody because I know you're clearing out right now. But so what happens when you have a diverse set of skills? You have a lot of different technical skills, but you're so spread out that people don't necessarily feel like you have, that you're almost too spread out. How do you
I
find
got it.
a job? Yeah.
I got it. So focus on the problems that you're solving. So how are you applying all those diverse skills? So are you one of those systems people? I think you probably are. So how do you apply skills from different disciplines and bring it together to solve a common problem? What story can you tell about how you're able to stitch those different skill sets together to make something better than what other people could do that don't have that broader background? Okay, so it's all about differentiating yourself and telling how you're able to apply your skill set. And don't worry if your story doesn't include every single thing that you can do. It's good that it's back there. What's more important is that you be able to show how you're able to apply the skills that you have. And those stories will be much more compelling than a list of topics that you put on your resume.
Yeah, and we were just actually asked the exact opposite question. And I agree with what you said, Dave. When you have a situation where you have a lot of different skills, you have to build what you're presenting to your potential employer, sort of like a bottom-up type method, taking all of the smaller parts to make a greater whole. And if you're the type of person where you're very, very niche, you need to figure out how to take that approach of what you're really good at and think outside the box of what else that can be applied to. And once you start thinking of how that niche skill can be applied to maybe other problems, it might help you to be able to find some opportunities that you didn't even realize actually fell within your niche. So it's kind of playing around with mental models and perception. Yeah. So hope that answered those questions. Um, yeah, I want to thank everybody again one more time. We're going to close out, and thank you, Dave, for putting this on. We hope to see everyone again later.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Have a good afternoon and a good weekend.
See you.